Buying a rental property in the UK is one of the best ways to make monthly passive income. However, as easy as it may sound, you just go out, buy a house, rent it out, make lots of money. There is actually a lot of moving factors when it comes to buying a rental property. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about 11 different things that you need to take on and consider when buying your first rental property so that you can minimize your mistakes and maximize your income. But just before we do that, just a quick introduction to myself. My name is Christos Fellas. I have owned a rental property for just over 1 year now, so I have been through the entire process. And on this YouTube channel, I talk all things investing and making money. So if any of those things do interest you, then consider subscribing down below. But other than that, let's jump straight into it. Number one, you're going to need to know your numbers. Now, when you are doing an investment into a property and purely for investment purposes, the numbers in that property are the only thing that you need to be worrying about. You need to know exactly how much your property is going to potentially be making you every single year when you take off things like service fees and mortgages and all of those kind of things. And the way that you can do that is by working out the rental yield. And basically the rental yield is the percentage of money that you receive back into your pocket every single year in comparison to the price that you paid for the property. Just taking a look at how you can actually work this out, there are plenty of online calculators, and just using this one as an example here, as we can say, we have put the purchase price of this property as £150,000, and we said that we are going to get a monthly rent of £1,000. Every single year it's going to cost us £2,000 to maintain the property, which then leaves us with an 8% gross yield. This is without the fees coming off, and then when we take off those £2,000 service charge fees, it's going to be a 6.6% net yield. So basically, if we are paying £150,000 for that property, we are going to get 6.67% of that money back every single year. Number two is you need to be taking zero emotions out of your property. Now, similar to number one, actually, property should just be a numbers game. There should be no emotional or sentimental attachment to a property that you are renting out, simply because it's only going to end in bad news. I've heard in the past countless amounts of people saying that they are planning to rent a property out that they are going to potentially move into in the future. This is of course going to be adding emotional attachment to that property. Me personally, I had this plan in the first place, and someone convinced me against it, and I'm so glad that they did now, because like I said, if you are buying a property to rent out that you're planning on moving into, if the tenant trashes it or if there is issues with the property, you are obviously going to be more emotionally affected, and you may be caused to make panic decisions or anything like that. Keep your emotions out of your rental properties. If you want to buy a property to live in, go and do that, but just try and keep it away from your investments. Number three, when you are actually looking at how much you can potentially afford to invest into a rental property and you're maybe looking at getting a mortgage, make sure you always shop around. Now, of course, the typical thing that most people do, including myself when I first started looking at it, is going into their bank, their building society, or maybe their local estate agent. Whilst this is good, and whilst I fully recommend that you should be doing this, it is also really recommended to go and look at an independent mortgage advisor as well. The reason why I say this is because normally with the independent mortgage advisors, you're going to be probably paying a little bit more money in their fees, but what they actually have is access to a lot more of a bigger list of lenders, which are probably going to get you a better deal overall. When you just go into a bank or a estate agent, normally what they'll do is take some details off you and just input it into a computer, bring back a list of results and say, look, that's the best one, and pretty much you can do all of this on your computer at home anyway. Tip number four is when you have found your property, you have made an offer on your property, you've had it accepted, you are going to need to make sure that you have all the right documents ready to go. The reason why I say this is because when your offer does get accepted on a property, things start to move very, very quickly, and there's going to be 5 things that you're going to need to make sure that you have in place from that moment that your property does get accepted. And that is number one, you're going to need a passport or photo ID, basically just proving that you are a real person. This is basically the first thing that any agent will ask for from you. The second thing you need to do is you need to provide a proof of address. So this could be anything from a utility bill, council tax bill, maybe even a bank statement. Basically, you need to have it dated within the last 3 months, if I remember correctly. It needs to have your name in it and your address, of course. So you need to prove where you are currently living. The next thing you need to do is actually prove that you can pay for the property. This is where you would have obviously picked your mortgage broker, and they would have put in your details. They would have worked out how much you can actually borrow and how much you can actually afford. And basically what they will provide you with is something called a decision in principle. This is basically just a draft mortgage agreement. It hasn't been fully accepted or put through, but it's all the estate agent requires just to prove that you can actually purchase that house and they can take it off the market. And then the final thing that you're going to need is, of course, a solicitor. This is somebody that is going to handle all the legal fees for you on the transaction of this property. I personally recommend going with the suggested solicitor for the estate agent you are using to buy that property. And the reason why I say this is because this is probably going to be a solicitor that they have dealt with best in the past and one that they have a really good relationship with. And the chances are you're going to have a lot more of a smoother process if that is the case. So they are the 5 things that you need to have in place from the second that you get your offer accepted on a property. Number 4, think of the type of tenant that you want to live in before you even start looking at a property. Using myself as an example, the apartment that I currently rent out is a city centre flat that is built for premium living, or was advertised as premium living, that is right next door to the city centre train station. So my target tenant was a working professional that had to potentially commute in the future. However, let's say that my target tenant was some students that wanted to rent my property on a room by room basis. Then having a city centre apartment that is close to a train station that is advertised as premium living typically isn't the thing that a student is going to want to go for. They're going to want to be going for as cheap as possible. They won't need the train, and the one that I am renting out currently in Norwich is nowhere near the university, so it's not the best one for them. So you need to understand who you are looking at renting out that property and buy your property on that basis. Number 5, always haggle for price when you are looking at purchasing an investment property. Now, as we are somebody looking to buy the property purely for investment basis, there is absolutely no rush for us to get that property as soon as we possibly can. We don't need it to live in. We're not being forced out of the house that we're currently in. We are in the driving seat, and you need to make sure that the estate agent senses that when you are looking at the property. And the reason why I say this is because let's say you were going to go and look at that property and you were constantly telling the estate agent, this is my dream home, I would love to live here, this is amazing. What you are doing is basically selling the property to that estate agent, and they're probably not going to want to budge with the price. Obviously, I know they are working just as an intermediate for the actual owner of the house, but they are still involved quite a lot in the negotiation process. Now, if you were to go into that property and you were very calm, you were very collected, and you were very looking at it from an investment point of view, yeah, this is okay, maybe it needs to be knocked down a little bit, the chances are you're going to get a better deal most of the time if you approach it with that attitude. And remember, if you are looking at a property and from the second you walk in you don't feel that it is right, do not panic at all. There are absolutely thousands and thousands of rental properties that you can go and look at the next day, the next week. There will always be the opportunity. So don't ever feel pushed or pressured into buying an investment property. And that, in fact, actually does lead me to number 6, which is patience with property is everything. Just like anything else in business investing, patience is so important. Now, I almost fell to a trap with this when I was buying my actual house to live in. Basically, what I did, it was the first ever property I went and looked at. I liked it, I thought it was brilliant, and I started to panic and think, I'm never going to find one as good as this. Bearing in mind, it's the first property I've ever looked around. I got on the phone to the estate agent ready to put my £1,000 deposit down on the property. For some reason or another, they took absolutely ages, and I was on the phone for over an hour and a half, and I decided just to leave it and come back the next week. And I guess you know what happens next. I then went and had a look at 2 or 3 properties that were all better than the property that I looked at before, but I could have easily made that rash decision where I went and put the deposit down on that property, and then that would have been pretty much it. I wouldn't have been able to discover the house that I eventually moved in. And yeah, it just goes to show that be patient. Do not feel that you are pressured pressured to do anything once again. Do not panic, and obviously just take your time when making your decision on an investment property. Number 7, and this one is pretty much my own personal opinion, but I would really avoid buying a fixer-upper as your first rental property. And when I say fixer-upper, what I'm talking about is one that maybe needs an entire wall rebuilt, or a property that needs the entire thing gutting out and like almost starting from the beginning again. I'm not talking about a property that maybe just needs a touch of paint or maybe needs a radiator replaced. I'm talking about a full doer-upper. And the reason why I say this is because if you are looking to make passive income monthly from renting that property out, you are going to be wanting to make that passive income as soon as possible after completing on that property. And if you are having to spend all of your time doing up the property, of course you cannot start doing that until you have completed on the property. And what happens when you complete on your property is your mortgage payments start, and you're actually going to have to start paying your mortgage payments with no actual income coming the other way. Now, I know, of course, paying your mortgage payments, you are paying off your house, but maybe you need that money to pay for other things, maybe like the house that you're currently living in. So I really recommend staying away from doing a fixer-upper as your first property. Maybe 2 or 3 down the line, it may be viable, but your first one, I think you should be getting the tenants in straight away and start earning that money as soon as possible. Number 8 is that you want to be thinking about your end goal when renting your property out. I personally think having an end goal with your property portfolio or your investment property that you're about to buy is extremely important, because I believe it, number 1, helps you pick the right property to invest in, and then number 2, it helps you make further decisions and sensible decisions down the line when it comes to actually making them on your property. Now, in my case, my rental property, my goal for it is actually to receive passive income, to actually use that income to pay off the bills and the mortgage for the property that I live in, and eventually own this one that I live in right now outright. And basically what I like to do is I like to just bring in the money every single month. However, if your goal was to potentially go and buy another property maybe a year down the line or 2 years down the line, then you may be wanting to remortgage your rental property over time or anything like that. And basically, because these are 2 different goals, it basically creates 2 different decisions that you have to make when it comes to working out your finances around your property. But the main thing here, this is just a couple of examples, is that you should have an end goal that you want to achieve with your rental property portfolio. Number 9 is to speak to other people that have experience in the rental property industry. Now, this is so important. This is something that I did for years before I even rented out my first property. And like I say, it's all good watching people on the internet. Of course, you know that I've had my rental property for over a year, but there are people out there that have had rental properties for 10, 20, 30 plus years that have gathered so much experience in this industry. You want to be asking them how to deal with tenants, what solicitors to use, all the different nicks and nags around renting a property out. Doing this and getting all this knowledge up front is going to make the process so much easier and less intimidating when you actually face these different challenges down the road. So really reach out. Don't be ashamed to ask questions to people that have done this in the past, because you will earn so much knowledge. And like I said, for me, I was asking people for years before I even rented out my first property, and it did help so much. And I guess the final thing to say, and probably one of the most important things, is you need to ask yourself, are you actually ready to be a landlord? Do you understand the responsibilities that you have as a landlord? Do you understand the risks that come with being a landlord? And do you understand all of the different little health checks, the safety checks, all of these little things like I've mentioned in this video? Do you understand all of these, and are you ready to take them on? And if you are answering that question as a yes, then of course it's a great time to go ahead and invest in your first rental property. Because coming from me, after doing it for 1 year, like I said, it hasn't been a very long time in my own personal experience, but over that year, as I mentioned in my previous video, I have absolutely loved it, and it is one of the best things and best decisions that I have ever made. So ask yourself these questions there, take on the other tips that I mentioned about in this video, and if those answers are a yes, then definitely go for it if your budget allows you to, because investing into property is such a good way to make passive income. I hope you found some value from this video. If you did find it useful, I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button down below. Obviously, comment down below below with any tips that you have for investing into property or rental properties or anything like that, and let's help the audience out in the comments section down below as well. Apart from that, guys, I shall see you in the next video. Take care, and yeah, I'll see you soon.